When you volunteer, rather than being called up, you can choose what job you want. And I wanted to do something mechanical. First thing I said, I want to be a dog handler. And they said, oh, dear me, no, that's for men. So that scotched that one. I said, well, I want to be a motorbike rider. Oh, dear me, no, that's for men only. So I said, well, just don't put me in the cookhouse. Do whatever you like with me, because I can't think of anything that I can do. So they said, well, we'll put you in the motoring section. And I've learned to drive a car and lorries and all sorts of lovely big things and small things. And I was very happy.
Things just developed from then on. Young men were disappearing from the town, going off into the army. Some were volunteered and others called up. And
I used to do voluntary work while I was on the newspaper. Any spare time I had at all, because we worked quite long hours, I used to do voluntary work in the Salvation Army canteen by Slough Station, so that was mostly for services people on their way to postings, you know. If you're called up, as people were then, into the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, you might be serving in Reading, in a barracks there, and then be transferred perhaps to Manchester or Scotland, and they'd come through Slough and have an hour or two spare, and they'd come into the Salvation Army for food and drink and gossip.
There was a war on, and you just had to sort of make the best of it. I joined in 1940, where I don't think they were bringing people in forcibly for quite a while after that, about a year after that. And one made friends with other people, and Glasgow was absolutely fantastic from a point of view of hospitality, and so, you know, they were brilliant to the service people. I lived in a Girl Guide hostel. It was called the Girl Guide Hostel. I shared a room with two ATS girls and another girl who was in a munition factory. And we were very good friends, and we used to do things together, go to dances and the usual thing, you know, when you're young. And then eventually the Americans came into it, and things changed a bit, so you had to watch your step.
It was very transient. They were through and you probably never saw them again. They'd always take a note of your name and your telephone number, and they'd say, next time I'm here I'll ring you. But I don't think I ever heard from anyone. And of course a lot of them didn't come back. I didn't do any whole days. I did it any spare time. Because with the newspaper job, you're expected at that time, you worked whenever there was work to be done. I don't think I'd ever heard of a 48-hour working week. But if you enjoy your job, you don't mind, do you?
Then there were wardens. They used to patrol to make sure nobody was showing a light, for instance, because, I mean, you could see if somebody was smoking a cigarette, it could be viewed from the sky as a little red glow, so they would know that there was people in the vicinity.
If you so much as let a crack of light coming out, the ALP would knock at the door and say, "You've got a light shining." Do you remember that?
yes, they were very, very strict. I think they wanted to see a crack,
Yes.
a crack of light, and if they did, they always made quite a fuss about it.
Unusually, there was nobody in our family that served. My stepfather, that worked in the Slough, was in the Home Guards, but it was a little bit like Dad's army. He would be hurt to hear me say that, I think.
The clerk, the butcher, the farmer, the member of parliament, they formed the civilian army, Britain's home guard. They started from scratch. Experience, equipment, supplies, all were scarce. Only one shell to fire at each practice.
When I talk about my father being in the Home Guard, it was only the one run by the gas company. It wasn't the main one. They only did their duty round the gasometer.
Yes, yes.
They didn't parade up and down the streets like Dad's army.
When they weren't working, the men patrolled the moors for parachutists, blocked the roads, rehearsed invasion defenses. For something had happened here the Germans could never understand. In a democracy, it is not the government that makes war. It is the people.
I did some fire watching. I don't remember much about that. It's only just come into my head. When I was about 60, I was still at school, but there were one or two ladies who worked in shops along the high street, and I knew them, and they said, would I like to join them as a fire watcher? And you actually got paid. I think I was given £0.50 each time I did it. So it was worth it, you know. But where we were in a little town in the borders of Scotland, there was very little chance of seeing any enemy action.
I joined a first aid group, learned first aid, and we learned how to put out fires with stirrup pumps and how to crawl along the floor if we were caught in a fire, all sorts of things like that, which I never had to make use of, fortunately. I was approached by the head of the YMCA in Wales about forming a group, concert party group, to entertain the forces. So a party was gathered together. We were from all walks of life, really, but musicians, singers, and most of us doubled up. For instance, the baritone singer was a fantastic cartoonist. The elocutionist played the musical saw and the viola, and we did lots of sketches, and we could perform for a couple of hours straight off without any pause. It was great fun, and we were very popular.
I did quite a lot during the war because I was a messenger boy. We had an ambulance station in King's Road, Egham, and they kept ambulances in there, so if an ambulance was required, that's where they went from. And I did a messenger duty twice a week there.
I used to work 7 hours overtime, and that was compulsory. And then we always spent weekends and all holidays touring Wales, soldiers' camps. Sometimes there could be a guide to take us to a secret place in the woods where there might be just 6 men. Perhaps that was about radar, we don't know. And we had lots of adventures and near misses. I often wonder why I'm still alive. And visited camps all over the place, including the island of Steepholm in the Bristol Channel. There are very dangerous currents around there. And we set off one winter, clad in umpteen coats, and a life belt, of course. And we were in a motor launch which had just come back from Dunkirk. But we couldn't land the safer side of the island because of the dangerous currents, and we had to land at the steep side, and the motor launch couldn't get in far enough, so we had to climb over the rail and jump into a rowing boat. And soldiers were lined alternately all the way up the cliff. They wore specially spiked boots to get a better grip, and we were manhandled all the way up the cliff. And the officers were waiting at the top in a row, waiting to greet us. We had a piano accordionist with us, I remember, and when it was time to return, there was a lovely sunset, and the piano accordionist played a tune, Red Sails in the Sunset, and the soldiers were singing, and then as we went further along, of course, the sound died out, but it was something to be remembered. We were asked, we were told somebody wanted to recognise us by receiving medals. But we all declined that. We didn't see why we should have medals for the work that we did. And so in the end, we had a certificate signed by royalty. And also, I used to play at what they called workers' playtime in the munitions factory, or whatever sort of factory, we never found out what. The night shift would be entertained. We'd arrive about 2 o'clock in the morning, do a performance. I'd have dinner in the canteen with them at 4 o'clock in the morning, go home, have an hour's sleep, and then go to work.
Should Egham be bombed, communications aren't what we've got now. They were very basic. I mean, telephone lines, not everybody had a telephone. The whole idea was if there was a message, say from the ambulance station, I had a bicycle and I'd get on my bike and I'd take it to where it was required and deliver it by hand, by mouth. And that meant really me going to the ambulance station. I wasn't allowed to undress. I had a bed which I could lay on, and if I could sleep. I never had to deliver any because we never were bombed, and I never had to. I was just duty there, just laying there dozing, and that was it. I did get a supper, usually cheese sandwiches. I felt I was helping to win the war. I was doing my bit.